Yep.
Let's go. Good morning. This is the Tuesday, March 1st meeting of the Railroad Transportation Safety District. My name is Deb Shore, serving as chair this year. And to my left from the City Council, Roy Christensen and Cindy Lamb. And to my right, Larry and Gaylord Baird from the City Council and Bill Avery from the County Board. We should be joined by Todd Wilchin, who's our third member from the Lancaster County Board. I will note that the Open Meetings Act is posted at the rear of the hearing room. And the first item is approval of the minutes. Our last meeting was held on December 7th, and they were emailed to you previously. Thank you.
I move approval of the minutes.
Second.
Motion is second to approve the minutes as previously emailed. Comments or corrections? Call the roll, please.
Shore?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Avery?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Wilson?
Motion carries unanimously. Item number 2, statement of financial activity. Liz.
Good morning, Liz Thannell with Lancaster County Budget and Fiscal Office. You have your statement of financial activity with you as of February 22nd, 2016. The first item on your report are tax revenues. I should point out that these revenues are as of January. You don't have your February earnings in there yet. They are just coming in this morning. I did see that there's about another $60,000 coming in for taxes today that'll be posted sometime this week. So you're at about 50% of your tax revenues for the year. Your 1.6 increase to your 1.6 levy is just starting to kick in, started kicking in January. So you'll see taxes starting to really increase, particularly in March. So you will exceed that budget figure by the end of the year, that $3.077 million. You've exceeded your your interest income budget already at $42,600 with a budget of $40,000. You will probably be somewhere in the $50,000, maybe $60,000 range by the end of the fiscal year. We did have some large CDs come due in December that brought that figure up quite a bit from the last quarter. So you are still at 50% of your total receipts as of February 22nd. In your disbursements, your commissions are running right equivalent to your tax revenues at 50% of the year. Operating expenses are at $24,774 or 27% of your budget of $92,650. Your construction costs are at $539,905, which is 7% of the $8 million that you have budgeted. And I did see a $200,000 invoice come through just today for, I think it was the Hickman. So your ending cash balance is about $800,000, along with investments of $14,278,000. So your total fund balance is $15,069,950. On this report, you'll see over to your far right, in a bit shaded, I did throw just a very preliminary FY17 budget estimate out there. So under tax revenues, you'll see a big increase at $4.1 million. I did throw that out there at a levy of 1.9 cents instead of the 1.6 you're at now. And up the investment interest income to $60,000. And based on Roger's CIP that he'll be talking to you more in depth later. So the total disbursements are at $9.6 million for the preliminary budget.
Questions for Liz regarding the budget? Okay. Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the financial statement?
So moved.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Christensen?
Yes.
Baird? Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Avery?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Wilson?
Yes.
Shore?
Yes. Motion carries unanimously. Item number 3, current budget status, project updates, and committee updates.
Good morning, Roger Feigert representing the RTSD. Second sheet in your packet handout is kind of our standard budget sheet. The top third is the operating budget, the bottom 2/3 the capital budget. For the purposes of this item, we'll just kind of be reviewing the actuals of where we are so far to date. Later on, when we talk about a draft budget, the far right column is a projection and a start on a draft budget for FY17. The operating budget, we've only spent about 27% of the budget. My management fees haven't been billed. That will happen between now and June. Typically wait till kind of the end of the year to bill for that. No unusual costs in the operating budget area, as far as I know at that point. We have 3 fairly significant projects, and we do have staff here today. I guess I don't want to rush things, certainly, as you look down through expenditures to date in the operating expenses. I'm not concerned about anything on any of those line items at this point to be able to stay on budget for those. Under the actual construction projects, I thought I would have staff come forward and talk about the updates for our 3 major projects that we have going on. The first one would be 33rd and Cornhusker project, and Chris Humphrey is here to give us an update on that.
Can I ask you a quick question before you go?
Sure.
Are there any of these projects, construction projects, where we have not expended any funds that you're surprised that we haven't in the past 6 months since the budget year began? Is there anything we need to be aware of?
No, and I will go through each one of those as we go down through where the status is and whether they're going to move ahead or not.
Thank you.
After the updates. Okay.
All right, Chris.
Good morning, I'm Chris Humphrey. I'm the RTSD project manager for the 33rd and Cornhusker project. And we've been pretty busy since we've last met in December. The Schemmer Associates, led by Mark Lujaharms, who's over here, have been very busy with the alternatives analysis phase. And just to kind of step back and refresh your memory of where we've been, we had a public meeting in November. And then after that public meeting, we got together and had a brainstorming session and came up with a lot of different alternatives of what can meet the purpose and need of the study. And all of those alternatives were kind of screened down to about 10 different families, we called them. And then those 10 different alternatives were screened down to 5. Those 5 alternatives were then screened down. We were trying to get to 3. I think in the past we've said that we were going to take 3 different alternative alignments to this next public meeting, but it's actually going to be 4. So there was 4 that we felt best meets the needs and the purpose of this study, which is just to improve the safety out there, improve the mobility, improve the delay that's out there, and make sure that everything meets traffic needs now and in the future. So the next public meeting that we have is March 15th. 4:30 to 6:30. It'll be at the same place, the NET building, up on North 33rd Street. I do have postcards here. They're blank. Anybody in the audience is welcome to take them, and you guys are welcome to take a handful and hand them out to your constituents as well. Basically, at that meeting, we're going to be refreshing them on some of the boards that we had at the last public meeting, just giving them a background on the project, and then we'll also be introducing them to these 4 different alignments and then getting feedback from them on these different alignments. We will have the information for all the boards for the open house posted on the website just before the open house, but we'll also email it out to you guys a few days in advance of that public meeting. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. What type of feedback will you be looking for from the public at those meetings?
Basically anything. We're just going to be having the displays and showing the different alignments. They are not necessarily on the same roadway system, so there'll be impacts to businesses. There'll be potential impacts to residents as well. the different screening criteria that we'll be looking at in this next round of screening to get from these 4 down to hopefully a preferred alignment that we could take into the next stage of design and the environmental process. We'll be looking at more technical things, and part of that will come back from the public as well, but we're looking at impacts to parks, trails. That'll be information that we'll get feedback from the public on as well. Just in general, how the traffic will flow, how Adams Street comes into the new intersection, I'll just call it, the new area of the new roadway network, I would say. How 33rd Street could tie into that, the changes, potential changes to Cornhusker Highway. We'll just be looking to get feedback from all of that, the businesses, the residents, the people that travel in the area.
And there will be staff at each alternative?
Correct. We'll have multiple stations, I think, goodness, maybe 7 or 8. Yeah, different stations that we'll have. And we'll also have comment forms at the public meeting. We'll have that same comment form on the website, which is www.33rdcornhusker.com, that they can comment on as well.
There'll be an interpreter there again?
Correct. There'll be a Spanish-speaking interpreter as well. And there's parking on the south side of the building, and it's all ADA accessible.
Thank you.
And just a reminder where we're meeting?
At the NET building, it's
Yeah.
at 1800 North 33rd Street. And it's from 4:30 to 6:30, and there's parking on the south side of the building.
And if a constituent has concerns maybe that are too complicated or lengthy to discuss with staff that night, you would be available for appointments in the following days?
Yes, definitely. They can contact me or Mark Lujaharms. Our information's on the postcard. It's also listed on the website as well.
Todd?
So the 4 alignments, will they be presented before to the public, or is this going to be when they're going to be announced? Or
This is when they'll be announced. So
Okay.
at the public meeting, we'll have large boards of all 4 different alternatives. We'll have one board that's kind of large, showing the entire study area, which is from 27th to 48th Street, Holdridge to Superior, and then we'll kind of zoom in and focus on just that roadway network for that particular alignment. And so it's a good opportunity for us to talk with the public, explain to them how traffic would flow in each of the different alternatives. These are very conceptual drawings, so it's nice to have an engineer walk them through how they would get to point A to point B. Yes, and we'll send out to you guys a couple days in advance in an email of what the alternatives will be, to give you guys an opportunity, and then we'll put it on the web at the same time we hold the open house for the general public.
So you're encouraging us to take a look ahead of time and have questions, because if
Yep.
we're in attendance, we might get questions as well. And
Correct, yep, and if you have any questions, contact me or Mark or Roger, and we can answer any questions that you may have.
And there will be some preliminary numbers available too, very preliminary with regards to cost, because as you said, these are very preliminary designs and things could change as we move through the step.
Correct, yeah, we're working on final tweaks to the cost estimate right now, so we'll have those in $2016, and then we'll also apply the time value of money and have somewhat of a range for those conceptual estimates.
And just off the top of your head, what is the projected construction begin date and end date? I know that that's really throwing it
Yeah.
out there, but so constituents kind of have an idea of the time frame we're talking about.
Okay, so kind of the way that this process will work, that we're right now in the PEL study, the preliminary environmental linkage study, and after this phase of the project is complete and it's determined that there is a feasible project, then we'll move into the next stage, which is preliminary design and environmental. And that process, with the environmental issues that we have in here, I imagine it would probably take 2 to 3 years. After that, we'll go into final design, which shouldn't take any more than a year. And then we will be able to enter the right-of-way appraisal acquisition stage. And again, depending on the alignments that's shown, that could take a couple years for that. And then construction, depending on the alignment that's chosen, could take 2 to 3 years. I wasn't adding all those up as I was going, but that's the range that we have.
That's the range.
Yep.
Okay. All right, any additional questions? Okay, Mark, is there anything you wanted to add? Okay.
While Rick is coming up to give us an update on Hickman, simply, there's 4 alternatives. They're not cast in concrete. Clearly, we'd expect those to be massaged, evolve, and change over time as the final design comes together. So just because we're showing 4 doesn't mean that's what it is. And part of the input and feedback may help us better and further refine those as we move ahead and try to find a best solution for that. So, Rick?
I'm Rick Hayden with Felsberg, Holt, Milovig. The Hickman Quiet Zone went into effect November 24th, and we've received the major invoice from pavers for about $200,000. We expect to see about $12,000 of additional expense from pavers for their seeding when the weather breaks in the spring, and they'll be done with their work. The railroad still has invoices trickling in. We just saw one today for about $10,000, so those should start tapering off as well. Based on the estimates that BNSF gave us at the beginning of the project, we had about $172,000 remaining. We don't think they're going to bill us for all of that because they've pretty much billed us for the work that was anticipated, and it's been coming in a little bit less than what their estimates were. So we should be in pretty good shape budget-wise. Be happy to answer any questions.
Regarding the Denton Quiet Zone?
Thank you, Rick. Okay, the other active project moving ahead with some study is the Southwest Lincoln Quiet Zone, and Justin Peterson from Olson Associates is here to give you a quick update on that as well. So.
Justin?
Good morning. Justin Peterson, Olson Associates, project manager for the Southwest Lincoln Quiet Zone feasibility study. I just want to give you guys a quick update. Again, remind you that this is the 8 crossings on the Hastings sub, the Amtrak line that runs southwest through Southwest Lincoln. So it's F Street, the Salt Creek Levee Trail, West A Street, Folsom Street Bypass, Van Dorn Street, Calvert, and Coddington. This will be a combination of both city and county jurisdictions. Just want to give you, again, a real quick overview of where we've been. We had our on-site diagnostic review meeting right before our last RTSD board meeting. I think we kind of went over that a little bit and went really great, other than it was December, so it was cold. But we had a great time out there with all the different stakeholders. We've had a recent progress meeting here with the RTSD staff and gave them a bit of where things stand. We have concepts laid out for all 8 crossings. Just because of the way the crossings are positioned with other things as far as spacing and those kind of things go, we don't have as many 2 options here, 2 options here, 2 options here. We really are kind of limited in this as far as one option really being what we might push forward. So that's kind of where we're at with those 8 crossings. We are getting some additional topo for a different trail option at the Salt Creek Rail Bridge. Topo survey. Yep, we have some surveyors out there. We had a snowstorm right before we wanted to go out originally, so now they're out there getting that information now. Looking at doing some different concepts to take the trail under the bridge there, similar to what's been done at other trail crossings of the Salt Creek Levee bridges. So we do tentatively trying to lock up the date with Park Middle School, but we're trying to get an April 19th or somewhere in that 3rd week of April public meeting to walk through our concepts, where we're at, just like we would at any other public meeting, kind of show them what we have on the table, let the public respond. We also are still on, I guess I'll end with this. When we started this project, we had committed to all of you that we would try to get done with this study by June, the June board meeting. we are still anticipating that we can hit that. We are still in the early discussions with BNSF walking through all of our concepts, and we're kind of at the mercy of them as far as the timeline it takes to kind of get to a point where we can kind of close things out. But just want to let all you know that we're still planning to get those concepts and any cost estimates, at least now, planning to have that ready for the June meeting to bring back before you. So any other questions that you may have on this project?
And you'll let us know when that meeting is scheduled.
Yep, I'll send you an email invite. Yep.
One other thing that we're also trying to do on that project is some additional meetings and investigation conversation with the railroad to make sure that we truly understand the train movements and the activity in that area, to make sure that the quiet zone options that we're coming up with are the right alternatives. We've had a couple of discussions over the phone, and right now working on trying to get the public projects manager from BNSF in here the third week of March to sit down and go over all those operations to make sure there isn't another option or another idea out there that before we get too deep into the actual quiet zone project. So we'll continue to keep you abreast of that. So
7 crossings in that zone would be the largest one.
yes.
Right, I was gonna ask what's maybe more typical. How many crossings do you normally deal with when you're implementing a quiet zone?
Well, it's been all over the board. In Hickman, it was 2 and a private crossing. Waverly was 2 and a private crossing along Cornhusker Highway. Let's see, 33rd, 35th, 40th, 44th, 70th, 5 or 6. And then we split South Salt Creek into a couple of different ones. So 7 or 8 is certainly on the higher side that we've done. It just depends on the environment and the community and how many crossings there are in that area. In Denton, we started off looking at about 5. We narrowed it down to 2 as being somewhat feasible, and then even those 2 fell off the board with the cost effectiveness part of that. So, okay.
Any other questions regarding any of the projects? Okay.
I will go through and discuss the rest of the projects and activity as it relates to the current budget, certainly. I would understand there might be some questions about where we are on crossings, so maybe I just will bring that up to start with. If I notice the county engineer is here, I would indicate again that with field visits with the county engineer, we had prepared a document for some proposed improvements for a number of crossings. That information was given to the public projects manager in Kansas City. We reviewed those. I have not yet received any information back from him on status or his proposal to move ahead with any of that work. That's on my agenda to visit with him if he's up here the third week of March to continue to push forward on those improvements. And I have not yet transmitted that information onto Union Pacific on at least one crossing north of town. So that's still a work in progress, but have not heard back from BNSF. And I think Larry and I still owe you a report. Ultimately, or the whole board is trying to prioritize crossings. One of the good things when you drag your feet is maybe somebody else will do some work for you. And I do notice in the update of the long-range transportation plan, they have been updating. Hopefully there's somebody in there that'll turn on my overhead. There's just a simple map that consultants in planning have been working on to update railroad tracks and crossings in the county. And if this comes up, this is a map that shows the location of the crossings and indicates perhaps how many trains.
Push a button. Yeah, I think
You're
you're supposed to. We're not sure which one, though.
Yeah.
Actually, it wasn't on out here, so now I've got a green light. May take a
Oh,
minute.
there's something, please wait.
Okay,
There.
perfect.
We can build So again, this is just shows the number of the crossings, gives the cross street. The light blue numbers indicate crossings that have an exposure rate over 50,000 or over 100,000, I actually believe. So we're going to continue to try to take advantage of work and information that is produced through the comp plan update and continue to update our website. So that's kind of where we are on the crossings. Did the county engineer want to weigh in or ask any questions at this point? I'd certainly.
Pam Dingman, Lancaster County Engineer. I would just, like to emphasize that the crossings that we've brought forward are very important to us. These are still last year's crossings that I requested assistance on, and I will be coming to Roger very shortly with this year's crossings that I request assistance on. In particular, I know that there has been a few citizens' complaints on the Denton crossing that currently exists, and we'll continue to work on those issues as they arise.
And for the citizens that are out there, I guess, not to shirk our responsibilities, but the maintenance and the responsibility for those crossings rest with the railroad. Pam and I are only able to accomplish what we can get them to do. We are trying to pay and help assist in the funding of those improvements, but unless the railroad actually comes forward, we'll keep pushing. We're a little bit at a loss. We can't work on their rights of way, so we'll keep those initiatives up, but it's not always in our hands on that. So, okay.
Good point.
Thank you, Pam.
Roger, do you want to flip that back off and see if we can get back to normal screen? Okay, we'll see if it, thank you.
They should be able, they're supposed
There
to be
we
able to
go.
flip back and forth. Okay. Quickly, I will go on down through, we haven't spent any money in the crossings. Again, I'm looking at the budget sheet that you've got, and I'm gonna just kind of, that shows past budget and the current budget. The middle in there, the railroad crossings, we haven't spent any money yet in there. The OPPD crossing at 91st and Yankee Hill is still in there, and the city project is moving ahead. I'd expect that to move ahead. Southwest 40th, I think, will just be zeroed out at the end of this year. I don't see any more expenditures on that. The Salt Creek Railroad Underpass project that's been on there for a long time, with the $50,000, we've been carrying it forward. That's with the NRD. In reviewing paperwork, they brought to my attention that our current interlocal agreement, approved in 2005, had a 5-year termination clause. So it was effectively terminated in 2010. We'll be working with them and our attorney to bring to the June meeting an update revised agreement with the NRD for that project and activity for your consideration. The project is still proposed to move ahead. We just haven't gotten anything done. Miscellaneous engineering, no change. Emergency safety, the same way. Waverly Quiet Zone is done. You had an update on 33rd. Hickman. OPPD at South 84th is still a placeholder as we wait for the Yankee Hill projects and the school and Jensen Park and all that to come online, whether or not we need to put improved crossing equipment there. Still working with the NRD on the Salt Creek Levee north of A. We'll just carry that forward if nothing happens. Park Boulevard Trail Crossing, we're all done. I don't think anything else will come forward on that. South Beltway, we haven't spent any money yet on that. We'll talk a little bit more about a draft agreement and a process. The Denton feasibility quiet zone, we've got a minor change order to sign to clean that up after the additional meetings and the interaction with the Parks Department and the trails, and going through some extra process before we were able to final that out. It still all fits within the overall budget for the project, but we need a change order with our consultant. The Denton quiet zone itself, that will go away as we're not moving ahead. Had a quick update on the Southwest Lincoln feasibility quiet zone, and again, until we actually get into June, I'm not sure what we would budget for the next year. We'll just have to wait and see for that as well. And then the last project listed down there is OPPD at Pine Lake, and that project's under design with the city right now. And Public Works Engineering is indicating that there'd be need for money in the next fiscal year. So when we talk about the budget, there would be some money in there. We've been using that as a placeholder in our accounts up to this point in time as well. Any questions on any of that activity? It shows capital-wise, we've spent less than $550,000 so far, but we're doing well. Most of that, again, we need to make sure we have the money in the bank before we would start a project. So,
Questions?
okay.
Okay,
Seeing none, just a couple of other things, updates. The nice thing about websites and information and new information is you have all that new information. The bad thing is trying to keep websites updated and whatnot. So we have produced an RTSD general sheet that kind of talks about the history of the RTSD, and it's got projects. You don't have a copy of this in front of you. We're looking at putting that on the website. I did meet with Deb and Roy as chair and vice chair last month to talk about just how things were going and things that we needed to be doing, and I will continue to meet with them. So we went through much of the website information. We need to get the old projects off, update the projects that are there, update the financial information, making sure that the appropriate information is there as well. The National Committee on Uniform Traffic Control Devices is in Savannah, Georgia this summer, June 8th to 10th, tentatively planning to go. Can't think of a better place to be in June than Georgia. I think they ought to flip-flop those. So for item number 3, that would generally be what I had. Any questions?
Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to item 4.
Okay. In your packet, Tony Jerna from HBE is coming up. You have a copy of an engagement letter. I finally found a parallel. If you think about engineering contracts and scope of services and whatnot, this engagement letter really is an explanation of what they're proposing to do in the upcoming year as they audit the financial statements for the year that ends June 30th. So it really becomes the scope. It sets clarity of what we're asking them to do, when they will do it, the cost to do that. And so I've asked Tony to kind of go over that so that we're reminded what we're asking them to do in the audit. So come on up, Tony, if you would please.
And will we need action on this item?
Yes. There is a signature block for the board chair, so at the end of this, we would ask for action.
Okay. Tony, welcome.
Welcome. I'm Tony Jarina with HBE, Beckermeyer Love in Lincoln here, and here to present the engagement letter describing our services we'll provide to the district. We will provide auditing services on the governmental activity of the major fund of RTSD. Upon the completion of our field work, we will provide an audit report. Included in that audit report will be a budgetary comparison schedule, a schedule of account with county treasurer, schedule of investments, schedule of insurance coverage, and a schedule of valuations, rates, extensions, collections, and net taxes receivable. The objective of our audit is to express an opinion about whether your basic financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects. We will conduct our audit in accordance with governmental auditing standards, and we will also perform tests of RTSD's compliance with provisions of applicable laws, regulations, contracts, and regulations, although the purpose of our audit is not to provide assurance on those. On the third page of the engagement letter is a description of management's responsibilities. In summary, these audited financial statements are the responsibility of management of RTSD and governance of RTSD. They are not the responsibility of HBE. On the fourth page of this engagement letter, we will expect to have our auditing services being worked on approximately mid-July to about the third week of July, and we expect to issue the audit report around September 30th or before September 30th of 2016. In addition to the in addition to the engagement, we will also include the budget for the year ended June 30th, 2017. Do you have any questions?
You're gonna do all this for $11,000?
That is our fee, yes.
Any additional questions? Roy?
I was just gonna move that we accept the letter of engagement as presented.
Second?
And how many years have you been with us?
Personally, or just with HPE?
HPE.
This will be the second full year, second audit year.
All right. Any additional questions? Call the roll, please.
Avery,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Wilkins,
Yes.
Short,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird.
Yes. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Draft budget and CIP.
Okay, back to your handouts. Again, the one page shows the existing budget. At the far right-hand column is a draft FY17 budget. As Liz Thanel said early, we've run the numbers for revenue on an estimated 1.9 levy increase. That's kind of what we've been working on the last year or so. Liz continues to watch historical expenditures, what we've really done, so we continue to try to pare the budget down. Right now, the proposed O&M budget, the operating budget, would be $79,200. That actually needs to go up $500. If you notice in the accounting and auditing, we had just carried over the $10,500 from last year. Based on the letter you just approved, that'll be $11,000. That'll get paid out in next year's budget. So when we come back, that would go up. So we'd be looking at about a $79,700 plus or minus budget, compared to a $92,650 in the current year. Obviously, we're not going to spend all that. So again, trying to be very frugal with the dollars there in the operating budget. Then as we move down into the projects, I would propose again, unless we find out something significantly different about crossings, we continue to budget the $250 and $50 for a total of $300 to be available. We'd carry over OPPD at 91st and Yankee Hill. Carry over the $50 unless we get it for the Salt Creek underpass, unless in conversations with the NRD and any grants they've got that would reduce that number. That would come back in June. Miscellaneous engineering at 100, emergency and safety at 100. We have bolded and put an asterisk on the 33rd and BNSF at $1 million. That's based. There was $1 million shown in the 6-year and the 12-year cash flow CIP that we currently have in place. Until we go on through the public meetings and show up at June, we don't know exactly what that'll be. So that's not cast in stone, and that number probably changes up or down depending on the next steps and what we need to go into as far as any next steps in the next fiscal year. So don't want anybody thinking that's an absolute. We haven't certainly guaranteed, and we're not. We don't have any contract signed for that at this point. Showing a little carryover money for Hickman. That number might go down.
Yeah, that seems high.
I'll work with Rick, and we'll try to really zero in when we're at the June meeting and only carry over. Once in a while, the railroad has thrown me a curve, and they'll send a bill pretty late. But same with OPPD at 84th. We just continue to use that as placeholder money. I think Park Boulevard. I've got to meet with the NRD and Parks and see whether or not that needs to have any money the 50,000 that's in there right now. I'm sorry, I had my finger on the wrong line. That goes to zero. That is done. The trail crossing on Park Boulevard down there just south of South Street. South Beltway, we'll continue to take the approximate $2.167 million, and we would continue to compound that. So the $6,501,000 would be 3 years of that, unless we make some kind of expenditure or agreement with NDOR or anyone else between now and the 1st of July. Denton feasibility goes away, Denton quiet zone goes away. Clearly, the Southwest Lincoln feasibility, we'll know a lot more over the next couple of months what we might be looking at or proposing in the next fiscal year. So for now, I just moved the 70,000 over there as a placeholder, and we'll wait and see on that. And we also have the startup money for new crossing of putting in gates and lights. The city will be widening and constructing Pine Lake Road, or starting on that. And there could be expenditures in FY17 on that project. And typical of any city or county project, the RTSD has been a funding agent to provide the upgrades and the safety improvements for gates and lights and other railroad associated equipment for those projects. So that's kind of where we are. Again, this is my request of you, is if you know of another project or an activity or something that you think we should be doing or not doing between now and June, let me know, and we'll continue to try to accumulate those things into the budget. The other attachments, you do have a cash flow sheet.
Are there any questions on the CIP before we move on?
I was just gonna
Yeah.
Oh,
tell
okay.
you what's here as it goes with the budget, and then I
Okay,
can come
okay,
back.
okay. Got it.
There is a cash flow sheet that simply would continue to show if we do the projects that are in the 6 and 12-year CIP in the way we show them, the cash flow sheet with the projected revenue and levy going to 1.9 in 17, 2.3 in 18, and then at 2.6 in the following year. That's the way that would play out. So that just is really the background and the basis for to build the projects. So those support what's in the budget or show where the budget would go. And with that, I would certainly try to answer any questions you've got about a proposed draft budget. I'm certainly not asking for any decisions, any direction, any approvals today. This is just for your information and getting prepared to go into the next year.
Roger, can you please walk us through this one a little bit, because I think it's one that we need to understand with more detail. You're basing this on projections for the full levy beginning in 2018. In the past, you've come before this body and advocated for restoration to the full levy immediately. And while that has not happened, we've tried to understand the implications of that. Can you walk us through the implications of that?
Sure.
Thank you.
Well, simply, like all good Nebraskans, I think we decide you can't spend money that you don't have. And so in the past, as the executive director, I've really tried.
Do you want to move the microphone to you? Thank you.
Tried to lay out the projects that I thought we needed to do, and in the past when we've had a full levy, how fast could we construct those projects based on that? With the recent challenges of receiving the full levy, the simple answer is the projects in the 6 and the 12 year, we have spread them out to maintain. Our goal in our cash flow program would be not to have less than $1.5 million of cash in any one year. This cash flow does show one year that it would go negative. So with the conversations that were going on between the county board and the city and this board, and kind of a sense, over here on the far left-hand side, we've got the calendar year tax roll. Then we've shown the levy. So in 14, we're in 15, the levy went up to 1.6. If we follow through with kind of the current plan that seems to be on the table between the bodies, it would go to 1.9 this summer, then 2.3, then 2.6, and then remain at 2.6. With those levies in place and then using a 2% annual valuation increase, the next column over is the tax roll. It shows the increased valuation, shows the valuation change, and then what it does in this column would show the net revenues that you would expect to receive. And then with those net revenues in place, then we'd subtract out operating expenditures and capital expenditures, and the numbers that are in this sheet for capital expenditures are the ones that are shown on the 6 and the 12-year CIP. And then the far right hand shows where our cash balance would actually be to do that. And you'll notice if we were going to spend money exactly the way it's shown in the CIP, we'd have to make some adjustments down in 2022. So this is really a roadmap to say, if this is the levy, we get this much money, we have these projects, and we've laid out the projects to be able to cash flow and build them according to the schedules that we have here today.
Great. What I would like to understand better are the implications of doing it this way versus the full levy had we done that in the current fiscal year or the next fiscal year.
Well,
what is the implications for time of these projects being done? What is the implication of this going red in 2022? Can you break that down for us a little bit more?
In generality, the simple answer is by, if you notice on this sheet, the levy difference between 15 and 16 of just 0.3 of a cent, there's almost $1 million difference coming in. If we were back at the 2.6, we would have been collecting $5.5 to $6 million over the last 3 or 4 years. Those would have been dollars that we could have either prepaid on the South Beltway sooner. We would have had more money perhaps in the bank for a project, whether it would be 33rd and Cornhusker, whether it happened to be another viaduct at Waverly, another quiet zone project that had a lot of dollars in it. The simple answer is if we have more revenue coming in, we can advance and probably do the projects faster.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I will continue to communicate with the county engineer's office as well, talking about this draft budget upcoming. I will continue to work with the railroad and try to push them on some of those. And I will continue to try to work on a continued effort to have prioritized crossing improvements across the county, Lorraine, that you had asked for earlier that I don't have done.
I think I was interested in looking at the priorities in general, not necessarily just the crossings, because you were looking at transferring money from different line items to support the crossings, and I wanted to understand that decision within the larger context of what the RTSD is charged to do, so we can weigh those priorities, recognizing that all of them have value.
Okay.
Thank you. Just the limited resources.
Not asking for any action on that item today.
Okay.
Okay.
Item, Phil.
I have a question. On this last sheet here, 2018 is, the expectation is that we will be back to the full levy of 26, right?
Yes.
Then you go over to the projected year-end cash balance. It drops down to 433 and some change. And that is, it looks like that's occasioned by the capital project expenditures of 9.7 million. Right?
Yes.
All right, what's exactly going on there? Why the 9 points?
If you turn to the next page also, one more page over, where in 2018,
You got your eye on it.
2019, if the 33rd Street crossing would move ahead, there would be a significant increase in that project expenditure. We're not there yet. That's just based on a projection of that project moving ahead and trying to stay on top of either design or right-of-way. And I think in that time frame in there, we would be in a point that we might be able to Chris left, so I won't have to worry about her following through. It could be that we'd be getting close to starting some right-of-way procurement at that point in time on a project. So it's all a factor of project schedule, spending, needing to spend more money at that point in time if that project moves ahead, and that eats into the cash balance significantly that year.
Is that an unusually low cash balance?
Our goal has been to keep a minimum of $1.5 million. That would probably be low of where we have been, because we have this is kind of a situation where we've got a couple of major projects in the pipeline here, with potentially funding the South Beltway, saving that money up and paying that out, as well as starting 33rd, or if some other project came up. So obviously, if those projects advance, they'll have to advance in a responsible way that we can fund them. We can't go in the red.
And I noticed that in the out years, there's a significant increase in capital project expenditures. I presume that's the South Beltway anticipated expenses.
Well, I think we proposed to pay off the Beltway earlier, because we've been budgeting and we were going to have all of the 13 million plus or minus available for the Beltway 6 years, starting 2 years ago. So Beltway expenditures could end in the 1920 fiscal year. That's part of that increase of jumping up to 9 million. That'd be the last year paying off the Beltway. But that's also then the first year of significant expenditures potentially starting for a 33rd Street project.
So the implications could be that 7.1 might need to be reduced and a portion of that project funded in the following fiscal year.
I would guarantee you that if we move ahead with 33rd and the BNSF crossing, those numbers will change, simply because the project will change, the costs will change, the schedule and timing will change. But this is my best estimate to you at this point in time, with revenues and expected costs, to give you, well, my goal is a sense of comfort for the community that if we're going to do a project, can we afford to do the project, and if so, how? So,
Todd?
Well, just to follow up on that question, and it goes back to that $7.1 million that you've proposed using what you said, your best estimate. But based on Chris's presentation, I mean, we're looking at a much longer, stretched out project. I mean, do you really believe we're going to spend $7.1 million?
well, that's 3 years from now.
3 years, but based on what Chris's timeline, you know, she's looking at, you know, 2 to 3 years in environmental review.
I think clearly, as we finish in June and we finish the Pell study, that maybe sets us at a point of having a whole new roadmap. If we've got an approval from this board to move ahead with a project that has 1 or 2 alternatives, it'd be nice if it were 1. At that point, I think we would probably sit down and lay out a new schedule. This is probably a little more aggressive, cash-wise. We also want to remember there's a little more cash in the front end of this from the RTSD standpoint, because our commitment to date has been the RTSD would fund studies and design to determine we have a feasible project. And then it would be at that point, if we have a feasible project, then we would be asking for cost share from our partners to buy the right-of-way and to actually construct it. So all of that, the numbers are going to be fairly large. If we go into a full design on this, it's going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars to do the design and get through the environmental document. And then when we start on the right-of-way, some of the options on right-of-way could be, you know, more than $10 million worth of right-of-way acquisition, but we're not there yet. So I guess It was my best guess through last year. As we go on in and move ahead, Chris will help me better understand whether or not those numbers can move on down the road. I'm sure they will, Todd, but it was the best information I had for you at this point in time.
Well, yeah, and I would just point out that, I mean, obviously this is probably the best case timeline, but that, I think we all know that that's not gonna happen.
If I don't plan for best case and we're working with the railroad, we never will get anything done. So we need to, I guess we want to be assertive and push as hard as we can and be prepared. And if things fall in place, we're able to do that. It is discouraging sometimes how long it can take to do a project.
Okay, any other questions before we move on to the cost share agreement?
Okay. Bill Kudelik is here to help me with this. I would tell you we've been talking about how the RTSD, the city, the county can forward discussions with NDOR to reduce, cap, or hold down the local costs on the South Beltway. Clearly there is an obligation for paying a share of the South Beltway, and the RTSD all along for the last several years has said we'll be a partner in that. So Bill, at my request, has put together a draft agreement. It's a target at this spot. It allows you to read, to start asking, maybe it spurs questions in your own mind about how are we gonna do this? What should we do in this agreement? It's currently written as a 4-party agreement. It may or may not end up being a 4-party agreement, but we've been talking about this now for most of the last year. We've been budgeting and setting aside money. So taking the initiative to try to continue the discussion and get things moving. So Bill will kind of go through and talk about kind of the primary components of this. Again, very draft, very preliminary. And with your thoughts, then I think our goal is to start trying to force those additional conversations with NDOR, the city, on how to continue to move this ahead to hold down our future costs. So.
Good morning. Bill Kudelik, Crosby Gunzel Law Firm. As Roger indicated, this is what I believe is the first iteration of a proposed agreement. It has between it the city, the RTSD, the county, and the State Department of Roads as parties to it, and it's basically dealing with our efforts to ensure a predictable funding mechanism for which this board has been dealing with respect to the 2 rail crossings that are part of the South Beltway project. It builds very much off of the May 2002 agreement between the city and the state regarding the 80-20 cost share portion. And with respect to what's in this particular agreement, it really builds off and makes clear that the RTSD funds that are committed toward those 2 crossings for the South Beltway are going to be attributable to the local share of that South Beltway project. 2, it doesn't really change the commitments of this board has made with respect to budgeting, levy process. There are no guarantees that this board is making with respect to those funds, but is simply saying as those funds come in that are committed with respect to our approved budget, we are going to deliver those to the state as proposed for purposes only of the rail crossing portion of the South Beltway project. It includes in there that if there are any changes to the project, for instance, if the rail crossing somehow aren't a portion of the project or the project for some reason doesn't go through, those funds would be returned to the RTSD for future use. Other than that, it's really an initial agreement. The actual expenditure of funds that are committed with respect to this agreement would be subject to subsequent interlocal agreements dealing with the actual expenditures for the particular 2 rail crossings. I'm here for questions.
Cindy.
Are the other partners also committing to place their funds in, I don't want to say siphon off, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. Take their funds and place them in a permanent place?
Personally, I have had no contact with the other counterparties to this agreement yet. Roger may, and I would defer to him if there are any of them.
In the current cost share agreement, the city of Lincoln is the one that's responsible for the 20% local share. County commissioners at this point do not have a cost share in the South Beltway. Their commitment is to accept relinquishment of that portion of Highway 2 or Warlick Boulevard that would be in the county at the said time that the South Beltway would be completed. So there have been conversations at the city level about the same goal. How can we perhaps prepay on the city's 20% local share to cap those costs, to hold those down? We hadn't gotten very far. We wanted to, I think from my perspective, by putting a draft together from the RTSD, then that draft can go to the city, and it perhaps is a document then that the city can open up the conversations with the Nebraska Department of Roads on why it would be in their best interest to accept ahead of time cash for that project and cap costs. That is not a typical mode of operation for NDOR. They cap their own costs, but they rarely cap the costs of the locals in the agreement, and our goal here is to do that very thing by offering to pay early. The city had taken some other steps that has reduced or paid off part of that local commitment that was a little over $40 million. We worked with the state and moved some obligations back and forth. We gave them some federal aid money early on that they used on the completion of the 6th laning of I-80 out near Northwest 48th Street. Those funds then the state used and subtracted off what we owe the state on the South Beltway. This would just be another step to go ahead and secure the railroad portion of that and to try to get that agreement in place, Cindy, that hopefully we would be able to negotiate with NDOR and say we're willing to pay up front, but if we pay up front, we want you to cap our costs and not base them on a final cost at the end of the project. So that's the whole purpose of getting this conversation started. And we'll need feedback from you all if there are pieces or parts or things that you need in here.
Roy?
I guess my question would be, what are the implications if we made this an agreement between this board and the state of Nebraska and just dealt directly with the state instead of dealing through the city or the county board?
I'm more than willing to go have that conversation, but I've been told explicitly several times over, NDOR is not necessarily interested in moving outside of their current agreement with the city of Lincoln. They don't want to open that up for renegotiation. I can certainly ask that.
Well, I'm not talking about renegotiating. I'm just saying, you know, when somebody owes me money, I don't care who pays. You know, I don't think the state would care either. You know, if we're sitting there saying we're going to pay $13 million, the RTSD is going to pay $13 million of the city's obligation, are they going to protest?
I would think not. And like I said, I'm open. By having something to start with, we can go from there. I would probably think the city would want to be a party to that signator because they want an agreement. They would want to be party to an agreement that the state signed accepting the RTSD to be assured it reduced their 20%. They're looking out for their own interests. But again, I think that's why we felt we needed to get started is there's going to be multiple iterations of this agreement and could be multiple partners, more or less. Probably not more than 4, but there certainly could be less than that. But
Bill, I've only had the chance to scan this, but can you point out the part that says after we pay what we've promised, we're not obligated to pay anymore?
There's nothing in this particular agreement that says once you've paid this, you're not obligated to pay more. What this simply says, and I could probably point to maybe section 2, that this board will continue its process of preparing its budget and its levy request to the county board for approval, and we've talked about that earlier in the meeting. That doesn't change that process at all. We're going to continue on that, but there are no guarantees by this particular board that of any defined amounts will be committed with respect to this agreement. So no, it doesn't address any cap.
Let me reword the question. With regards to the state,
Mhm.
we're telling the state that we are going to, I gotta pull out my CIP again. You transfer, let's say 6.5 now, and we're gonna transfer 2.1 until the end of 2020. They designed the project, they determined that the bridges are gonna be way more expensive than they anticipated. Could they then come back to the RTSD at that point and say, okay, you gave us this money up front to cap the cost, but now it's going to be more? That was my question.
There's no obligation of this particular board to do that in this particular form of the agreement, no. If costs were increased, I think Roger would come to you as part of the budget process, determine we're over budget, and there would be budget alterations as a result of that on an ongoing annual basis.
But I think if I understand what Deb's trying to get at, we were told at one point that should we decide to bank this money early, we would lock in the pricing in today's dollars and not be responsible for further expenditures related to those particular items should they go up in the future. Is that correct? Or are we just simply transferring money now?
That is clearly our strategy and goal. But what I would tell you is there is no current agreement in place that does that. So through this mechanism and revising or amending the current agreement between the City of Lincoln and NDOR is how we'll have to accomplish that. Because today there is no cap on the local share for the South Beltway. And that was I think our whole strategy for saying if we could collect it earlier, that's an excuse to go ask for that kind of an amendment into the agreement, Lorraine. And we have not done that yet.
But
We've
that's
talked about it.
That's your plan.
That's our plan,
Gotcha.
yes.
Okay.
And just to make this clear to everybody who's maybe listening, the 3 or 4 people out there listening to our meeting today.
Maybe not that
the-
many.
The issue is the obligations between the city and the state.
That's correct.
It is not between the county board and the state, or this board and the state. It is between the city and the state. And if this board pays in money for the overpasses, is because we choose to do so, not because we have been obligated to do so by the state.
That is correct.
Okay.
The only clarification is the agreement for the local share is a 3-party agreement, city, state, and county, but the county doesn't have a financial commitment in that agreement for the 20% local share. The city does. But it is a 3-party agreement, and if that gets amended or changed and we try to put these things in it, the county board, by reference and part of that agreement, I think have to probably need to be, well, they certainly need to be in the discussion, and you are with 3 members on the board. That isn't to say the state couldn't amend and write just a separate agreement for that cost share on the 20%, and if it doesn't change or affect the county, maybe the existing agreement stays in place. But
What comes first, the agreement between the city and the state to cap the 20%, or this 4-party agreement that we're discussing today?
well, I think it's an egg and a chicken. And I think this is the information. If you tell Bill and I to go forth and try to cap the future costs of this body, I can use this document to then start meeting with the administration and try to plan a strategy then to go meet with NDOR to accomplish just that, which is to cap the future costs.
Larian?
Okay, so, and just to play out that scenario a little further, if in fact you aren't successful, if they say, no, we're not going to cap the cost of the railroad crossings just because you're giving us the capital up front, can we keep it so we can earn the interest? Not that we have the highest interest rates on our funds, but why would we then transfer the money early?
Good point. If there isn't an advantage for us to advance it, we certainly ought to keep it, and either, if we don't need it, lower the levy. If there's some other project, we can use it to advance or speed up one of our other projects that we would have at that point. But clearly, I would not, in good conscience, recommend to this board to give anybody advance cash if there isn't a
Agreement.
financial advantage to this board to do so.
Thank you.
Okay. Any final questions? So you would like each of us to review it? Any comments or questions
Yes.
to you and to Bill?
Yes.
And we'll have it on the agenda for our upcoming meeting to discuss once again.
Well, actually, maybe it's a nod of head. I don't know that we need a motion. If you would get back comments to us, I would like to start conversations with the city and then the state before our next June meeting. I certainly can't and would not commit to any exact language, but at least we've got a jacket here to start with. So you telling us what you think you can live with and the things you can't live with, then we're in a position to go that next step.
2 weeks, is that sufficient for us to review and get any comments back to the both of you by, that would be March 15th?
That'd be fine.
Okay,
Perfect.
all right.
Our meeting next is June 6th, right?
Right.
Right. But, okay, Todd.
Well, I was gonna follow up with the questions. Do you want language in there to address the capping of the expenditures, or is that something that you are not interested? I mean, and I know that's the objective, but I mean, are we talking about that too early?
No, it's gonna have to be in one of the agreements, either the revised amendment between the city and the state, and if we are thinking, you know, if it's appropriate to try to cap the 20% total local share, then it would seem like maybe we should try to cap the RTSD. We'll get our best estimate. We can assume that we should try to put some of that kind of draft language in here as well, that if we're paying up front, there's going to be an agreed upon price, and that's where we settle.
Okay, so you've got already a suggestion for bullet point 8, or whatever it might be. Cindy?
So are we able to make this contingent upon that cap?
Well, if we make it part of the agreement itself, then we'll all be in agreement if approved and executed, right? So it probably takes care of the contingency. If we do it in separate agreements, then maybe that is important, that this particular funding agreement where the RTSD is committing to pay its or to deliver its collected funds to the state for purposes of the project is contingent upon this other capping cost share agreement. That certainly meets, I think, the goals of what I've heard today regarding the advantages of prepaying, and that's certainly the reason. So yes, we can do that if it's two separate agreements. If it's all one, if we can take care of it all in a single agreement, I think takes care of itself.
So we'll make it so this is not a standalone agreement in some fashion.
Well, yes, yes.
Okay. Enough guidance for this point in time?
Thank you.
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
We'll look forward to your comments in 2 weeks. Thank you.
All right, moving on, item 7, non-agenda items, an opportunity for public comment. Is there anyone wishing to make public comment? If not, I will note that our next meeting is going to be held Monday, June 6th at 11 a.m.
I move adjournment.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Short,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Avery,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Wilkin.
Yes.
We are adjourned. Thank you.